The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy that flows through stars, planets, and the void between them. For thousands of generations, the Jedi had served as its guardians, maintaining balance and peace. But the Jedi were gone now, hunted to near extinction, their temples burned, their legacy reduced to myth and propaganda. The Empire ruled through fear and overwhelming might, its star destroyers casting shadows across 1,000 systems. Yet even the Emperor, seated in his throne on Coruscant, could not have predicted what was about to tear through the fabric of reality itself. In the Outer Rim, beyond the reach of the core world's endless surveillance, space itself began to scream. It started as a pinprick of impossible light, not the blue-white tunnel of hyperspace, but something wrong, something that made nearby stars flicker and dim. The light expanded, reality stretching like overheated transparent steel, and then it shattered. The explosion of dimensional energy erupted in a cascade of colors that shouldn't exist, electromagnetic radiation that fried every sensor within 3 parsecs. And through the rupture came a figure wreathed in golden energy, tumbling through the void, unconscious and burning like a falling star. Superboy-Prime crashed into the forest moon of Alderaan with the force of an orbital bombardment. The impact crater stretched half a kilometer wide, ancient trees vaporized in an instant, bedrock liquefied into glass. The shockwave flattened everything within 5 kilometers, sending wildlife fleeing in panic and triggering seismic sensors across the entire moon. At the center of the devastation, half buried in molten stone that was already cooling around him, lay a young man in a tattered costume bearing a symbol that meant nothing to this galaxy, a stylized S shield across his chest. For several minutes, nothing moved. Smoke rose in thick columns. Then the figure's eyes snapped open, glowing red with heat vision that carved trenches through the crater as he pulled himself free. Where, his voice was hoarse, confused. Clark Kent of Earth Prime looked up at an unfamiliar sky, at stars in configurations he'd never seen, at twin moons hanging in an amber atmosphere. His last memory was the fight, the endless, desperate fight against heroes who didn't understand, who tried to stop him from fixing everything. He'd punched reality itself, trying to break through to a universe where things made sense, where he could be the hero he was supposed to be. And now he was, here. Wherever here was. Prime rose into the air, hovering above the destruction he'd caused, and assessed himself. His costume was shredded but already regenerating its molecular structure. His powers felt intact, he could feel solar radiation from the nearby yellow sun feeding his cells, strengthening him. But something was different about this place. The air tasted wrong. The ambient energy felt strange, like invisible currents flowing through everything, touching everything except him. He flew upward, breaking through the atmosphere in seconds, and surveyed the system. Multiple planets orbited the sun, several with signs of civilization, city lights on night sides, orbital platforms, ships moving between worlds. Advanced, but not as advanced as Earth Prime had been. And there, on the 4th planet, a massive installation sprawling across the surface like a metallic cancer. An Imperial mining facility. Not that Prime knew what the Empire was yet. He descended toward it, landing in the central courtyard hard enough to crack the duracrete beneath his boots. Stormtroopers immediately surrounded him, raising their blaster rifles. Prime stared at them, faceless soldiers in white armor, utterly uniform, mechanical in their precision. Exactly the kind of militaristic oppression he'd learned to recognize. "Identify yourself," barked an officer. "You are in violation of Imperial space. Surrender immediately or..." Prime's heat vision carved through the officer before he could finish the sentence. The superheated beams swept across the courtyard, and 24 stormtroopers died before they could fire a single shot. The few blaster bolts that did strike him ricocheted harmlessly off his invulnerable skin. "I'm Superboy-Prime," he announced to the facility's loudspeakers, his voice carrying across the compound. "And I'm shutting you fascists down." What followed wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Prime tore through the facility like a force of nature, impervious to blaster fire, to thermal detonators, to the desperate E-web heavy repeating blasters the garrison deployed. He ripped bulkheads apart with his bare hands, collapsed entire sections of the installation with contemptuous ease, and sent any soldier who tried to stop him flying through walls. Within 15 minutes, the facility was a smoking ruin, its reactors destabilized, its command structure dead or fleeing in panic. And throughout the galaxy, in a meditation chamber deep within the Super Star Destroyer Executor, Darth Vader felt something he hadn't experienced in years: confusion. A massive disturbance in the Force, like a stone thrown into still water, but the stone itself was invisible. Empty. The destruction was real, he could sense hundreds dying, but the cause registered as nothing more than a void where something should exist. "My lord?" His admiral's voice crackled through the comm. "We're receiving emergency transmissions from Outer Rim installations. Multiple facilities reporting, they're reporting a single hostile entity. Humanoid. Invulnerable to all weapons. The survivors are calling it a demon in a cape." Vader rose from his meditation pod, his respirator hissing in the darkness. "Assemble a fleet. I will investigate this disturbance personally." On Coruscant, in the Imperial Palace, Emperor Palpatine opened his yellow eyes and smiled. Something new had entered his galaxy. Something unprecedented. The Force couldn't touch it, couldn't predict it, couldn't even perceive it clearly. It was a blind spot in his perfect vision of the future. And blind spots, the Emperor knew, could be either threats or opportunities. Back on Dandaran's moon, Superboy-Prime stood atop the ruins of the Imperial facility, breathing hard not from exertion but from satisfaction. This felt right. This felt like what he was supposed to do: find evil, destroy it, save people. He didn't know what empire meant yet, didn't understand the galactic political situation, but he recognized oppression when he saw it. Somewhere in this backwards galaxy, there had to be people worth saving. Heroes worth helping. A cause worth fighting for. He just had to find them. Prime launched himself into the sky, leaving the burning facility behind, unaware that he'd just declared war on the most powerful regime in galactic history. Unaware that the greatest dark side user in a millennium had just marked him for death. Unaware that in the shadows between stars, rebel operatives were already receiving reports of an impossible weapon that had just appeared out of nowhere. The galaxy would never be the same. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Inquisitorius had served the Empire faithfully since the Purge, hunting down the remnants of the Jedi Order with ruthless efficiency. They were the Emperor's personal agents, fallen Jedi twisted by the dark side, trained to sense Force-sensitive individuals across vast distances and eliminate them without mercy. The fifth brother had personally killed 11 Jedi Knights. The seventh sister had dragged 3 Padawans screaming into Imperial custody. They considered themselves the apex predators of the New Order. None of them were prepared for Superboy-Prime. The call had come directly from Lord Vader himself: investigate the Outer Rim disturbances and capture or eliminate the entity responsible. 5 Inquisitors deployed to the Alderaan system aboard a Gozanti-class cruiser, their red lightsaber blades humming with anticipation. They tracked the anomaly to the forest moon, following the trail of destroyed Imperial facilities like breadcrumbs. 3 more installations had fallen in the 2 days since the initial attack, each one obliterated with the same overwhelming force, the same surgical precision. The fifth brother stood at the cruiser's viewport, his massive frame silhouetted against the stars. "The disturbance is strange. I sense death, destruction, but the source remains unclear. Like trying to perceive a shadow cast by something that doesn't exist." "Lord Vader warned us," the seventh sister replied, her voice sharp and calculating. "This entity doesn't register in the Force. It's a void. But voids can still be killed. They found Prime on a nameless asteroid, tearing apart an Imperial weapons depot with his bare hands. He was methodical about it, crushing turbolaser batteries, ripping apart TIE fighter docking bays, ensuring that every piece of military hardware was rendered completely unusable. Several dozen stormtroopers lay scattered across the facility's landing platform, unconscious but alive. Prime had learned to pull his punches with the regular soldiers. They were just following orders. It was the officers who deserved worse. The Inquisitors descended on him like birds of prey, their lightsabers igniting in synchronized arcs of crimson light. Prime turned, genuinely surprised to see weapons he didn't recognize, blades made of pure plasma, impossibly hot, wielded by figures in black armor who moved with predatory grace. Finally, Prime muttered, cracking his knuckles. Someone who might actually be a challenge. The fifth brother struck first, his double-bladed lightsaber spinning in a devastating arc aimed at Prime's neck. The blade connected with his skin and stopped cold, the plasma edge sizzling uselessly against invulnerable Kryptonian flesh. Prime caught the lightsaber's hilt mid-swing and crushed it like paper, the weapon sparking and dying in his grip. Impossible, the fifth brother breathed, just before Prime's fist caved in his chest plate and sent him rocketing backward through 3 walls. The seventh sister was faster, more tactical. She used the Force to hurl debris at Prime from every angle while her companions attacked in coordinated strikes. Prime batted away the projectiles effortlessly, his super speed making their Force-enhanced movements look sluggish by comparison. A lightsaber thrust aimed at his eye simply slid off his cornea. A Force push that should have crushed Durasteel barely made him sway. "What are you?" the ninth sister demanded, her cybernetic enhancements whirring as she attempted to read his emotions through the Force. But there was nothing, no fear, no hatred, just an overwhelming sense of righteous fury that existed completely outside the currents of the Force itself. "I'm the hero this galaxy needs," Prime replied, and his heat vision reduced her lightsaber to molten slag before she could react. His follow-up punch was measured, controlled. He'd learned over the years how to incapacitate without killing, but to baseline humans, even a restrained blow from Superboy-Prime was catastrophic. She went down hard, armor cracked, unconscious before she hit the ground. The remaining Inquisitors attempted to retreat, to regroup, to call for reinforcements. Prime didn't let them. He moved at speeds that made blaster bolts look stationary, disarming them one by one, breaking their weapons, shattering their confidence. The eighth brother tried to escape using his lightsaber's built-in helicopter function. Prime simply flew after him, grabbed him mid-flight, and deposited him unconscious next to his companions. In less than 3 minutes, 5 of the Empire's most feared Force users lay defeated in a heap. Prime stood over them, breathing easily, entirely untouched. He'd expected them to be tougher. The energy blades had been interesting, some kind of contained plasma technology, surprisingly sophisticated, but their wielders were just enhanced humans. Fast, skilled, but ultimately fragile. He felt a familiar disappointment settling over him. Was this galaxy's version of powerful really this weak? He was about to leave when one of the Inquisitors, the seventh sister, groaned back to consciousness. Prime knelt beside her, pulling off her helmet to reveal a Mirialan woman with geometric tattoos across her face. Her yellow eyes fixed on him with a mixture of pain and genuine terror. What are you?" she rasped. "I told you. I'm a hero. And you're working for fascists." Prime gestured at her Imperial insignia. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to your bosses and tell them that this galaxy has a new protector. Tell them the Empire's days of oppression are over. Tell them that Superboy-Prime is here, and I'm shutting them down." The seventh sister laughed, a bitter sound. "You don't understand. The Empire spans 1,000,000 worlds. Lord Vader alone is more powerful than you can imagine. The Emperor," she stopped, genuine fear flickering across her face. "The Emperor sees everything. You've made an enemy of a force that has destroyed entire civilizations." "Good," Prime replied, standing. "Then they'll know exactly who's coming for them." He flew off, leaving the Inquisitors alive but thoroughly defeated, unaware that this mercy would prove to be a critical mistake. The seventh sister pulled herself upright, activating her emergency beacon with trembling hands. Her transmission was brief, encrypted, and directed to only one recipient. Lord Vader received the message 2 hours later aboard the Executor. He listened to the seventh sister's report in silence, his respirator the only sound in the command chamber. 5 Inquisitors defeated in minutes. Lightsabers useless. Force powers ineffective. A being of impossible strength who claimed to be a hero, and had declared war on the Empire itself. Admiral Pyatt stood at attention, visibly uncomfortable. My lord, with respect, perhaps this threat is being overstated. The Inquisitors may have simply underestimated. Vader's force choke cut him off mid-sentence. The Admiral clawed at his throat, feet lifting off the deck, until Vader released him with a contemptuous gesture. Do not presume to lecture me on threat assessment, Admiral. Assemble a task force. 6-star destroyers. 3 fighter wings. I will confront this anomaly personally. Yes, my lord, Pyatt gasped, retreating quickly. Vader turned back to the viewport, staring out at the endless stars. Something was deeply wrong about this entity. The Force should have warned him of such a powerful presence entering the galaxy. The Emperor's foresight should have perceived it long before it arrived. Yet both of them had been blind until the destruction began. A being that existed outside the Force entirely. A void in the cosmic order. Either it would become a weapon for the Empire, or it would be destroyed. There was no third option. Across the galaxy, in a hidden base on the planet Yavin 4, the Rebel Alliance was having a similar conversation. Mon Mothma stood before the assembled command staff, her expression troubled as she reviewed the intelligence reports coming in from their spy networks. 3 Imperial installations destroyed in as many days, she said quietly. Hundreds of casualties, all Imperial. No demands, no negotiations, just systematic obliteration. And according to our sources, the individual responsible is completely immune to Imperial weapons. It could be a disinformation campaign, suggested General Jan Dodonna. The Empire spreading rumors to frighten systems considering rebellion. The intelligence is confirmed from multiple sources, countered Admiral Raddus. Whatever this entity is, it's real. And it's tearing through Imperial infrastructure like it doesn't exist. Princess Leia Organa leaned forward, her diplomatic instincts warring with desperate hope. If this being is truly fighting the Empire, we need to make contact. An asset this powerful could turn the tide of the war. Or it could be uncontrollable, Mon Mothma replied. We don't fight the Empire's tyranny just to replace it with chaos. Send reconnaissance teams. Observe but don't engage. We need to understand what we're dealing with before we make any decisions. The meeting adjourned, but Leia remained, staring at the holographic star maps showing Prime's path of destruction. Something about this felt wrong. Heroes didn't just appear out of nowhere and start destroying things, no matter how justified the target. And beings with unlimited power rarely used it responsibly. She'd seen what happened when power went unchecked. She'd watched her own father become Darth Vader. This new variable in the galactic equation could save them all or doom them just as thoroughly as the Empire ever had. And the Alliance had no way of knowing which until it was too late. Superboy-Prime had decided he liked flying through this galaxy's space. No air resistance, unlimited solar radiation feeding his cells, and the sheer vastness gave him time to think, something he'd never been good at, but was trying to improve. 3 weeks had passed since his arrival, and he'd developed something resembling a routine: locate Imperial installations, assess their purpose, and if they were military or oppressive in nature, dismantle them completely. He'd destroyed 17 facilities so far. Weapons depots, intelligence outposts, garrison bases on conquered worlds. Each one had been a clear target, obviously evil, obviously deserving of destruction. The soldiers who fought back were just doing their jobs, he tried not to kill them unless they forced his hand. But the officers, the ones giving orders, the ones who enforced this Empire's tyranny. They got what they deserved. What Prime hadn't found yet was anyone actually worth saving. He'd expected grateful civilians, liberated populations, people who would recognize him as their savior. Instead, he found fear. The locals on worlds he'd helped scattered when he approached, hiding in their homes, refusing to make eye contact. Some even called for Imperial protection after he'd driven the garrison away. It didn't make sense. Couldn't they see he was trying to help them? Prime was pondering this frustrating contradiction when his superhearing picked up something unusual, a firefight, multiple weapons discharging, and underneath it all, voices shouting coordinated tactics. Not Imperial standard procedure, something more desperate, more improvised. He followed the sound to a cargo facility on the industrial moon of Kelrodo AI, arriving just in time to see a small group of fighters in mismatched armor exchanging blaster fire with a full platoon of stormtroopers. The non-Imperials were outnumbered 3-1, pinned down behind cargo containers, clearly losing. One of them, a Twi'lek woman with a singed flight suit, took a blaster bolt to the shoulder and went down hard. Prime smiled. Finally. People actually fighting back. He dropped into the middle of the Imperial formation like a meteor, the impact cratering the Duracrete and sending stormtroopers flying. Before they could reorient, he was moving, disarming soldiers with surgical precision, crushing blaster rifles, using his heat vision to weld blast doors shut and trap reinforcements. Within 30 seconds, the entire Imperial platoon was neutralized, unconscious or fleeing, and Prime stood in the center of the aftermath looking extremely pleased with himself. "You're welcome," he announced to the shell-shocked rebels. The fighters emerged from cover slowly, weapons still raised, clearly uncertain whether they'd just been saved or had traded one threat for another. Their leader, a scarred human man with a captain's insignia on his stolen Imperial vest, approached cautiously. "You're the one the Empire's hunting," he said, voice carefully neutral. "The demon. The Inquisitor killer." "Superboy-Prime," Prime corrected, extending his hand. "And you're rebels, right? Fighting against the Empire? That makes us allies." The captain didn't take the offered hand. "We're operatives of the Rebel Alliance. And we didn't ask for your help." Prime's smile faltered. "What? I just saved your lives. Those Imperials would have killed you. Those Imperials were about to let us retreat with the intelligence we came for," the captain replied tersely. "We had an exit strategy. Now we have a destroyed facility, 24 casualties, and every Imperial ship in the sector converging on our position because you can't tell the difference between a tactical extraction and a suicide mission. But, they were shooting at you." "It's a war," the Twi'lek woman said, clutching her wounded shoulder as their medic worked on her. "Sometimes we take damage. Sometimes we lose people. But we do it smart, we do it with purpose, and we don't paint enormous targets on ourselves that bring the entire Imperial fleet down on civilian populations." Prime felt anger rising in his chest, the familiar, righteous fury that these people couldn't see he was trying to help. "I've destroyed 17 Imperial bases. I've saved hundreds of lives. I'm doing more to fight the Empire than your entire alliance. You're causing chaos," the captain shot back. "Uncoordinated, reckless chaos that the Empire is using to justify crackdowns on a dozen worlds. After you destroyed the garrison on Kelvin Station, the Empire sent 3-star destroyers and glassed the entire colony. 2 million dead. Congratulations, hero." The words hit Prime like a physical blow. That's not my fault. I didn't." "You didn't think," the Twi'lek interrupted. "You have all this power and you're just smashing things without understanding the consequences. The Empire doesn't just rebuild what you destroy, they retaliate. Against civilians. Against anyone they think might have helped you." Prime wanted to argue, to explain that they were wrong, that he was doing this right, but the certainty that had driven him for weeks was cracking. He'd been so sure. So absolutely convinced that destroying Imperial targets was the heroic thing to do. "Then tell me how to do it right," he said finally. You're the experts. I'll follow your lead. The captain exchanged glances with his team. A Bothan intelligence officer shook his head minutely. The Twi'lek looked openly skeptical. Finally, the captain spoke. We'll take you to our commanders. Let them decide what to do with you. But understand this, the Rebel Alliance doesn't work with loose cannons. We have structure, strategy, discipline. If you can't follow orders, if you can't operate as part of a team, then you're just another problem we have to solve. I can follow orders, Prime insisted, though even he heard the defensiveness in his voice. I was part of teams before. I worked with other heroes. I know how to. A massive shadow fell across the cargo facility. Prime looked up to see a star destroyer emerging from hyperspace directly above them, its wedge-shaped hull blotting out the sun. Then another. Then 4 more, dropping into position with the precision of an Imperial noose tightening. And descending from the lead destroyer on a shuttle was a figure Prime's X-ray vision couldn't quite penetrate. Something about the armor disrupted his sight, but he could see enough. Cybernetic limbs, a respirator system, and an aura of menace so thick it was almost tangible even without whatever force these people kept mentioning. Vader, the captain whispered, all color draining from his face. We need to go. Now. Who's Vader? Prime asked. The Twi'lek stared at him in disbelief. The Dark Lord of the Sith. The Emperor's enforcer. He's killed more Jedi than anyone in history. If he's here personally, we're already dead. Then I'll handle him, Prime said, rising into the air. Get your people to safety. I've got this. You don't understand, the captain started, but Prime was already accelerating toward the descending shuttle, leaving a sonic boom in his wake. The rebel operatives didn't waste time arguing. They grabbed their wounded and ran for their concealed transport, knowing they had minutes at best before the Imperial blockade locked down the entire system. As they reached their ship, the captain looked back to see Prime intercept Vader's shuttle in midair. May the Force be with him, the Twi'lek muttered. He's going to need it. The Force can't touch him, the Bothan replied grimly. That's probably the only reason he'll survive the next 5 minutes. Their ship lifted off, threading between the gaps in the Imperial blockade that Prime's distraction had created. As they jumped to hyperspace, the last thing their sensors registered was an explosion of energy as Prime and Vader's first class shattered every window in the cargo facility and registered on seismographs across the entire moon. Back on Yavin 4, Mon Mothma received the team's report with growing concern. The entity, Superboy-Prime, had made contact. He'd offered to help. He'd claimed to want to follow orders. And he'd just engaged Darth Vader in single combat, completely disregarding every strategic principle the Alliance held sacred. Assemble the Command Council, she ordered quietly. We need to decide what we're going to do about our new ally, before he destroys the rebellion trying to save it. Princess Leia stood at the war room's viewport, watching X-Wings conduct training maneuvers in Yavin's atmosphere. She'd spent her entire life fighting for freedom, learning that true victory required sacrifice, patience, and wisdom. Power alone had never been enough, her father was proof of that. And now they had someone with seemingly unlimited power and absolutely no wisdom crashing through the galaxy like a thermal detonator looking for a target. The Force, Leia thought, might have finally given them the weapon they needed to defeat the Empire. She just wasn't sure they'd survive using it. The shuttle exploded before it could land. Prime's punch tore through the armored hull like tissue paper, sending the entire craft spinning out of control. He'd expected to pull the pilot out, disable the ship, force this Vader person to face him on the ground like a real opponent. What he didn't expect was for the shuttle to suddenly arrest its spin mid-air, held by an invisible force, and settle gently onto the landing platform despite catastrophic structural damage. The boarding ramp lowered, smoke billowing from the ruptured fuselage, and through it walked a figure that made Prime reassess his initial dismissal. Darth Vader stood over 2 meters tall, encased in black armor that reflected no light, his cape billowing in the burning wind from the destroyed shuttle. The respirator in his mask cycled with mechanical precision, each breath a measured promise of death. But it was his presence that struck Prime, not physical, not something he could see or measure with his senses, but an overwhelming aura of controlled fury that seemed to warp the very air around him. "You are the anomaly," Vader stated, his voice processed through the vocabulator into something inhuman. "The void in the Force." "I'm Superboy-Prime," Prime replied, landing on the platform 20 meters away. "And you're Darth Vader, the Empire's attack dog. I've heard about you, Jedi killer, enforcer, tyrant. You're exactly the kind of villain I came here to stop." "You came here?" Vader's mask tilted slightly, the gesture somehow conveying curiosity despite its immobility. "You are not native to this galaxy. That much is clear. The Force has never been blind to anything that exists within its domain until you arrived." Prime cracked his knuckles, settling into a fighting stance. "I don't know what this Force thing is, but I don't need it. I've got power you can't imagine. Last chance, surrender, and I'll make sure you get a fair trial for your crimes." Vader's response was to extend his hand. Prime felt nothing, no push, no pull, no sensation of energy hitting him. But the cargo containers stacked around the landing platform tore free of their moorings and hurtled toward him from 6 directions simultaneously, each one weighing several tons, moving at speeds that would have pulverized Durasteel. Prime stood his ground, letting them impact his body and shatter into debris. When the dust cleared, he was completely unharmed, brushing fragments of metal off his shoulders. "That's it?" Prime said, disappointed. "Telekinesis. I've fought people with that. It doesn't work on me." "I had to confirm," Vader replied, igniting his lightsaber. The crimson blade hummed to life, casting bloody light across his mask. "The Force cannot touch you directly. Fascinating. That limitation has just been removed." Vader moved with a speed that surprised Prime, not super speed, but faster than any human should be capable of in full armor. The lightsaber struck in a diagonal slash aimed at Prime's neck, and Prime caught the blade between his palms, stopping it cold. The plasma edge sizzled against his invulnerable skin, unable to cut, unable to burn. "Plasma blade," Prime observed. "Creative. But useless against." Vader twisted the lightsaber, changed the angle, and brought his free hand up in a gesture. The landing platform beneath Prime's feet exploded, not from telekinesis directly affecting him, but from Vader compressing the duracrete itself until it detonated from internal pressure. Prime fell through the collapsing structure, momentarily off balance, and Vader struck again, not at Prime, but at the support pylons holding up the massive cargo crane overhead. 3 tons of industrial machinery crashed down onto Prime's position. He burst through it easily, rising back into the air, but Vader was already moving, using the Force to hurl debris and create a storm of projectiles that forced Prime to constantly defend his position. None of it hurt him, but it was tactically brilliant. Vader wasn't trying to damage Prime directly. He was controlling the battlefield, limiting Prime's movement options, studying his reactions. "You're good," Prime admitted, charging forward at super speed. He closed the distance in a microsecond and threw a punch that would have shattered a mountain. Vader sidestepped with precognitive timing that should have been impossible, the Force showing him Prime's intentions a split second before they manifested. The punch missed by millimeters and demolished the building behind Vader in a cascade of collapsing Durasteel. Prime spun, throwing a follow-up combination, but Vader had already moved, his lightsaber redirecting Prime's momentum rather than blocking it directly, using minimal force to maximum effect. It was like fighting smoke. Every time Prime thought he had the positioning, Vader flowed around him, staying just out of reach, never committing to exchanges he couldn't win. "Stand still." Prime snarled, his heat vision carving molten trenches across the platform. Vader's lightsaber deflected the beams with precise economy of motion, the plasma blade absorbing the energy and dissipating it harmlessly. The Sith Lord was breathing harder now, maintaining this level of force precognition and augmentation against an opponent who moved at supersonic speeds required tremendous concentration, but his discipline held. Prime was getting frustrated, and Vader recognized it immediately. Frustration led to mistakes. The Dark Lord reached out through the Force, not at Prime, that was impossible, but at everything around him. The atmosphere itself became a weapon, compressed into a sphere and then released in a concussive blast that shattered windows across the entire facility. Prime weathered it easily, but the shockwave gave Vader the split second he needed to close distance and strike at Prime's eyes with the lightsaber's tip. The blade skittered off Prime's cornea harmlessly, but the audacity of the attack made Prime blink in surprise. Vader used that microsecond to force leap backward, putting distance between them again, breathing heavily behind his mask. His armor was scorched in places where Prime's attacks had come too close, his cape shredded by supersonic shockwaves. "You're tougher than the others," Prime said, hovering in the air. "I'll give you that. But you can't actually hurt me. This can only end one way." "You are correct," Vader replied, his respirator cycling rapidly. "I cannot kill you through direct combat. Your invulnerability is absolute. But you fundamentally misunderstand the nature of power in this galaxy." Vader gestured toward the horizon, where 6 star destroyers hung in low orbit, their turbolaser batteries charging with ominous light. "I do not need to defeat you personally. I need only position you where my weapons can be brought to bear. Tell me, Anomaly, how do you fare against a star destroyer's full broadside? Against orbital bombardment calculated in gigatons? Against the massed firepower of the Imperial Navy?" Prime's confidence flickered for the first time. "You'd destroy this entire moon just to test that?" Without hesitation, Vader confirmed. "The Empire's resources are infinite. Your durability, impressive as it is, remains theoretical. Shall we conduct an experiment?" The Star Destroyers adjusted their positions, targeting solutions calculating in real time. Prime could see the turbolaser batteries rotating to track his position, could calculate the firepower about to be unleashed. He'd tanked nuclear weapons before, survived attacks that cracked continental plates, but something about Vader's absolute certainty made him hesitate. "Or," Vader continued, his voice somehow carrying across the distance despite speaking normally, "you could cease this pointless destruction and listen. The Emperor has sensed your arrival. He wishes to speak with you. Not as an enemy, as a being of unique nature who might understand the necessity of order in a chaotic galaxy." "Order?" Prime laughed bitterly. "You mean tyranny. Control. Exactly what I came here to stop." "You came here?" Vader repeated, seizing on the phrasing. "From where? Another galaxy? Another dimension? You speak of stopping tyranny, yet you understand nothing of this galaxy's history, its needs, its fundamental nature. The old Republic collapsed into chaos. The Clone Wars nearly destroyed civilization. The Empire brought stability. Through fear. Through oppression. Through strength." Vader deactivated his lightsaber, a gesture of calculated risk. "You possess tremendous power and absolutely no wisdom. You have destroyed Imperial facilities without understanding their purpose. You have killed Imperial personnel without learning their stories. You act without thinking, strike without planning, and call it heroism." Prime wanted to argue, but the rebel captain's words echoed in his mind. 2 million dead on Kelvin Station. Retaliation against civilians. Consequences he'd never considered. "The Emperor can provide answers," Vader continued. "Explanations of this galaxy's true nature. The role the Force plays in maintaining balance. And perhaps, guidance on how to use your power in ways that actually matter. I don't need guidance from a tyrant. Then you will continue stumbling blindly through the galaxy, causing chaos, until the Empire is forced to respond with sufficient force to neutralize you. And I assure you, Anomaly, we have sufficient force. The question is whether you wish to learn that lesson through dialogue or through orbital bombardment." The Star Destroyer's weapons reached full charge, their targeting computers locked on Prime's position. Vader stood perfectly still, a figure of absolute confidence, betting his life that Prime's hesitation would prove stronger than his aggression. Prime looked at the warships overhead, at the destroyed facility around them, at the Sith Lord who had just fought him to a strategic stalemate despite lacking any power that could actually harm him. For the first time since arriving in this galaxy, Superboy-Prime felt uncertainty settling into his core. Maybe he didn't understand this place as well as he thought. One conversation, Prime said finally. With your Emperor. But I'm not joining your empire. I'm not becoming one of you. Of course not, Vader replied, his mask somehow conveying satisfaction. The Emperor merely wishes to educate you. What you choose to do with that education is entirely your decision. Vader turned toward the intact shuttle that had just landed beside the destroyed one, cape billowing dramatically. Come. The Emperor awaits on Coruscant. And unlike our encounter, I suspect his words will prove far more dangerous than any weapon you've yet encountered. Prime followed, unaware that he'd just made the most consequential decision of his time in this galaxy. Unaware that on Yavin 4, rebel intelligence was frantically transmitting warnings. The anomaly is compromised. Vader has him. Repeat, Vader has secured the asset. And unaware that in his throne room on Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine was smiling, his yellow eyes gleaming with malevolent anticipation. The galaxy's most dangerous predator had just identified new prey. Coruscant had been the center of galactic civilization for 25,000 years, a planet-wide city that pulsed with the endless energy of quadrillions of inhabitants. From orbit, it looked like a jewel, its surface glittering with billions of lights, atmospheric traffic flowing in organized streams between towers that pierced the cloud layer. Prime had seen impressive cities before, Metropolis, Earth Prime's gleaming capitals, but nothing matched the sheer scale of Coruscant's urban sprawl. The Imperial Palace dominated the landscape, a massive pyramid of dark stone that had once been the Jedi Temple. The symbolism wasn't lost on Prime, even without understanding the full history. Conquerors always built their thrones on the graves of those they defeated. Vader's shuttle descended through multiple security perimeters, each one bristling with enough firepower to reduce a capital ship to debris. Imperial guards, silent figures in crimson robes and armor, lined the corridors as Vader led Prime deeper into the palace's heart. Their force pikes tracked his movement with mechanical precision, but none of them spoke, none of them challenged him. It was eerie, this disciplined silence, so different from the chaos of battle. The Emperor rarely grants audiences to outsiders, Vader said as they walked. You should consider this an extraordinary honor. Or a trap, Prime replied. I'm not stupid. This whole place is designed to intimidate. If we wished to trap you, we would have done so on Calrodo-AI. The orbital bombardment was not a bluff. The Emperor prefers conversation to violence. It is more efficient. They entered a turbolift that descended for what felt like minutes, dropping deep beneath the palace's foundation. Prime's X-ray vision tried to penetrate the walls, to assess the structure, but something about the architecture resisted his scan, dense materials, strange energy patterns he couldn't identify. When the doors finally opened, they revealed a throne room shrouded in shadows, lit only by the faint glow of Coruscant cityscape visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. And seated on a throne of black stone, hunched and seemingly frail, was Emperor Palpatine. Prime had expected someone more impressive. The Emperor looked ancient, his face lined with deep wrinkles, his yellow eyes the only feature that seemed truly alive in the dimness. He wore simple black robes, no crown, no obvious symbols of power. If Prime had passed him on a street, he would have dismissed him as just another elderly politician clinging to relevance. That dismissal lasted exactly as long as it took the Emperor to speak. Welcome, Superboy-Prime, Palpatine said, his voice soft but carrying absolute authority. I have waited with great interest for this meeting. You are quite unlike anything this galaxy has ever produced. You know my name, Prime said cautiously, staying near the entrance, ready to react if this became hostile. I know many things. I have seen your arrival through the Force, though you yourself remain invisible to it. A void where something should exist. A shadow cast by light that doesn't shine in this spectrum. The Emperor rose slowly, leaning on a cane, moving with the careful deliberation of extreme age. Tell me, do you understand what the Force is? Some kind of energy field. Vader used it to throw things at me. Your Inquisitors mentioned it before I beat them. A functional definition, but incomplete. Palpatine approached a holographic projector and activated it, displaying the galaxy in miniature. The Force is the fundamental energy that binds all living things. It flows through every being, every planet, every star. It has a will, a purpose, a balance that must be maintained. For millennia, the Jedi served as its guardians, believing that peace and passivity represented that balance. The hologram shifted, showing images of wars, burning worlds, collapsing civilizations. They were wrong. The old republic rotted from within, corruption, bureaucratic paralysis, endless debates while systems suffered. The Clone Wars were the inevitable result. 3 years of galactic-scale carnage that killed trillions and nearly destroyed civilization itself. The Jedi, for all their power and wisdom, were incapable of preventing it. Incapable of making the hard decisions necessary for true peace. So you took over, Prime said flatly. Seized power. Installed yourself as dictator. I brought order, Palpatine corrected gently. I ended the war. I unified the galaxy under a single authority capable of making decisions without endless committee discussions. I created stability where there had been only chaos. His yellow eyes fixed on Prime with unsettling intensity. You understand this, don't you? You've seen governments fail. Seen heroes hesitate when action was needed. Seen the weak and corrupt hide behind laws while evil flourished. Prime felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. He had seen that. He'd watched the heroes of his universe refuse to do what was necessary, watched them compromise and negotiate with villains who deserved destruction. He'd tried to fix it, tried to make them understand, and they'd fought him instead. I've seen heroes fail, Prime admitted. But that doesn't make tyranny right. Tyranny. Palpatine smiled, the expression somehow more disturbing than anger would have been. Such an interesting word. Tell me, when you destroyed those Imperial facilities, were you not imposing your will on this galaxy? When you killed Imperial officers without trial, without understanding their circumstances, were you not acting as judge and executioner? When you decided, unilaterally, that the Empire was evil and must be destroyed, were you not practicing tyranny of the highest order? That's different. I was fighting oppression. You were fighting what you perceived as oppression, based on assumptions formed in the first 3 weeks of your arrival. Palpatine's tone remained infuriatingly reasonable. You know nothing of this galaxy's history. Nothing of the systems that depend on Imperial infrastructure for survival. Nothing of the billions who support the Empire not from fear, but from genuine belief that it represents their best hope for prosperity and security. The hologram changed again, showing dozens of worlds, agricultural planets, industrial centers, research stations, all functioning in apparent peace and productivity under Imperial governance. The Rebel Alliance would tell you these worlds are oppressed. They would claim the Empire rules through fear alone. Yet these populations are better fed, better protected, better educated than they were under the Republic. Crime has decreased by 70% across core worlds. Piracy in Outer Rim trade routes has been virtually eliminated. Medical advances have extended average lifespans by 8 years. These are not the accomplishments of arbitrary tyranny. You're using propaganda, Prime countered, but his voice lacked conviction. I am showing you reality. The Rebel Alliance operates on nostalgia for a republic that never truly existed. They remember the ideal, not the corruption. They want freedom without acknowledging that freedom without order is merely chaos. Palpatine moved closer, his cane tapping softly on the polished floor. You have incredible power, young Prime. Power that could genuinely change this galaxy. But power without wisdom is simply destruction. And you've already learned that lesson, haven't you? Prime thought of Kelvin Station. 2 million dead in Imperial retaliation. Vader told you, he said quietly. Vader reported the facts. But I sense you already knew. Already felt the weight of unintended consequences. The Emperor's voice softened further, almost paternal. This is the burden of true power. Every action creates reactions you cannot fully predict. Every choice affects millions of lives you will never meet. The difference between a hero and a tyrant is not power, it's understanding. And you, my young friend, are beginning to understand. What do you want from me? Prime asked directly, cutting through the philosophical discussion. Palpatine smiled. I want nothing. I am offering something, knowledge. Perspective. The opportunity to learn why this galaxy functions as it does before you continue your crusade. You came here believing yourself a hero. Perhaps you are. But heroes in this galaxy do not operate alone. They do not smash blindly at perceived evil. They understand context, strategy, consequence. You want me to join the Empire. I want you to make an informed decision. Remain at court for 1 week. Learn our history. Meet our officials. See the infrastructure that keeps a million worlds functioning. Understand what you're actually fighting against. Then, if you still believe the Empire is purely evil and must be destroyed, I will not stop you from trying. The offer was so reasonable, so carefully constructed, that Prime found himself nodding before he fully processed the implications. A week to learn. To understand. To make sure he wasn't just repeating his mistakes from Earth Prime, where he'd been so certain he was right and everyone else was wrong. 1 week, Prime agreed. But I'm not joining you. I'm not becoming one of your enforcers. Of course not, Palpatine replied smoothly. You are far too powerful to serve. You would be a partner, not a subordinate. An independent agent who might, occasionally, lend his remarkable abilities to maintaining order in an otherwise chaotic galaxy. The Emperor gestured toward the windows, where Coruscant's endless cityscape glittered in the darkness. This galaxy has never seen anyone like you, Superboy-Prime. You could be its greatest defender or its most devastating threat. I merely wish to ensure you understand which role you're choosing before you commit to it irrevocably. Prime stared out at the city, at billions of lives flowing through those illuminated towers. Somewhere down there, people were living their lives, working, raising families, trying to survive. Did they see the Empire as evil? Or did they see it as the only thing keeping the galaxy from tearing itself apart? He'd been so sure when he arrived. So absolutely certain of right and wrong. Now, standing in the Emperor's throne room, listening to arguments that made uncomfortable sense, Prime felt that certainty cracking like ice under pressure. 1 week, he repeated. Then I decide. Splendid. Palpatine returned to his throne, settling into it with evident satisfaction. Lord Vader will arrange your accommodations and begin your education. I believe you'll find this galaxy far more complicated than you initially assumed. As Vader led Prime from the throne room, the Emperor sat in darkness, his yellow eyes gleaming with malevolent triumph. The boy was powerful, yes. Unprecedented, certainly. But ultimately, he was just another fool who believed power and righteousness were the same thing. And fools, no matter how powerful, could always be manipulated. In a hidden chamber on Yavin 4, Princess Leia watched the holographic transmission from their deep cover agent on Coruscant with growing horror. The entity, Superboy-Prime, had agreed to stay at the Imperial Palace. To learn from Palpatine himself. To consider joining the Empire. He doesn't understand, she said quietly. He doesn't know what Palpatine is. What the dark side does to people. Perhaps he's immune, Mon Mothma suggested, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it. If the Force cannot touch him. The Force isn't what we need to worry about, Leia interrupted. Palpatine doesn't need the Force to corrupt people. He uses truth, partial truth, and logic twisted just enough to make evil seem reasonable. And this Prime, he's powerful, but he's not wise. He's exactly the kind of person Palpatine has spent 60 years learning to manipulate. Can we stop it? General Dodonna asked. Leia stared at the frozen hologram, at the image of Prime following Vader deeper into the palace. I don't know. But we have to try. Because if Palpatine turns that power to the Empire's purposes, the rebellion dies. And any hope of freedom dies with it. The Imperial archives occupied 17 sublevels beneath the palace, containing the recorded history of galactic civilization stretching back 25 millennia. Prime spent his first 3 days there, surrounded by ancient datacrons, holographic records, and historical documents that painted a picture far more complex than he'd anticipated. The old Republic hadn't been the noble democracy the rebels romanticized. It had been corrupt, bureaucratic, paralyzed by endless Senate debates while corporations enslaved entire species and criminal cartels operated with impunity. The Clone Wars footage was particularly damning. Jedi generals leading clone soldiers into meat grinders, billions dying while politicians argued about jurisdiction and trade routes, systems seceding because the Republic simply couldn't protect them anymore. Grand Moff Tarkin personally guided Prime through the military history, his angular face impassive as he displayed battle after battle where Republic indecision had cost lives. The Jedi were powerful, Tarkin explained, his cultured accent making even criticism sound like academic observation, but they were philosophers, not leaders. They couldn't make hard decisions. Couldn't sacrifice the few to save the many. By the war's end, the Republic was already dead, it simply hadn't stopped moving yet. Prime found himself nodding along, uncomfortable with how much sense it made. On the fourth day, Vader took him to the industrial moon of Fonder, to observe Imperial shipyards constructing vessels that would protect trade routes and patrol systems too remote for rapid response. Thousands of workers, human, alien, droid, labored in organized efficiency, building star destroyers piece by piece. Vader explained the economics. These ships suppressed piracy, protected cargo vessels, ensured agricultural worlds could sell their crops without fear of raiders. Without the Imperial Navy, interstellar commerce would collapse. The rebellion calls us oppressors, Vader said as they watched a Star Destroyer superstructure take shape. They do not mention that Imperial infrastructure moves 97% of all galactic trade. That our agricultural distribution networks feed 400 billion beings who would otherwise starve. That our medical vessels respond to plagues the Republic ignored because Outer Rim lives weren't worth Senate appropriations. But you destroyed the Jedi, Prime countered. Hunted them to extinction. They were supposed to be the good guys. The Jedi served their purpose for 1,000 generations, Vader replied, his voice carefully neutral. But they became dogmatic. Inflexible. They forbade attachment, emotion, passion, the very things that make beings fight for what they love. When crisis came, they were unprepared. And their rigidity made them vulnerable to manipulation. There was something in Vader's tone, some buried pain that Prime's enhanced hearing detected beneath the vocabulator's processing. You sound like you knew them personally. I did, Vader admitted after a long pause. I was once a Jedi Knight. I believed in their teachings. And I watched those teachings fail when the galaxy needed them most. The Emperor offered a better path, strength, decisiveness, the will to act when action was required. I chose power over dogma. I have never regretted that choice. The lie was so smooth, delivered with such conviction, that Prime almost believed it. Almost. But his superhearing caught the slight elevation in Vader's heart rate, the minute change in respiratory pattern. Vader was telling a truth that wasn't quite true, a story he told himself so many times he'd almost made it real. You don't believe that, Prime said quietly. Vader's mask turned toward him, the lenses reflecting Prime's face. For a long moment, the Dark Lord said nothing. Then, what I believe is irrelevant. The galaxy requires order. The Empire provides it. Whether I found peace in my choices is immaterial to their necessity. It was the most honest thing Vader had said, and it disturbed Prime more than any propaganda could have. On the 5th day, Palpatine invited Prime to dinner, a private meal in the Emperor's personal chambers, served by silent attendants who might have been human or might have been sophisticated droids. The old man seemed almost grandfatherly here, discussing philosophy and power with the casual warmth of a mentor guiding a promising student. "You're troubled," Palpatine observed, sipping wine from a crystal glass. "The archives have shown you truths that conflict with your initial assumptions." "I thought it would be simpler," Prime admitted. "Good versus evil. Heroes versus villains. Like it was supposed to be. Like it was on your world." Palpatine's yellow eyes gleamed with interest. "Tell me about your Earth, Prime. What made you leave?" Prime found himself talking, really talking, for the first time since arriving in this galaxy. He told the Emperor about the crisis, about watching heroes compromise with villains, about the multiverse collapsing while supposed champions debated endlessly about the right way to save it. He talked about being dismissed, about being told his methods were too extreme, about fighting desperately to preserve his world while others called him a monster. "You tried to save them," Palpatine said softly. "And they rejected you for it. They didn't understand. They wanted to save everyone, even the villains, even the people trying to destroy everything. They couldn't make the hard choices." "Precisely what happened to the Jedi," Palpatine replied. "Precisely why they failed. You understand this instinctively, young Prime, that true heroism sometimes requires actions others will call villainous. That saving millions may require sacrificing thousands. That moral purity is a luxury only those who refuse to make real decisions can afford." The Emperor leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The Rebel Alliance believes in ideals. Beautiful, inspiring ideals about freedom and democracy and the inherent goodness of sentient beings. But ideals don't feed starving populations. Ideals don't stop pirates from raiding agricultural transports. Ideals don't maintain the infrastructure that keeps a million worlds alive. Power does. Strength does. The will to act without apology does. But what about the people who don't want your order?" Prime asked. "The ones who'd rather be free. Free to do what? Starve? Watch their children die from preventable diseases? Live in fear of warlords and criminals?" Palpatine's smile was almost sad. "Freedom is meaningless without stability. And stability requires power, concentrated, decisive, uncompromising. I do not claim to be beloved. I claim to be necessary." Prime wanted to argue, but the logic was seductive. He'd seen the Republic's failures in the archives. Seen systems collapse into chaos without strong central authority. Seen what happened when leaders were too weak to make hard choices. "The rebellion opposes you," he said, trying to find solid ground. "Doesn't that mean something? That people would rather fight than accept your rule?" "The rebellion represents perhaps 0.1% of the galactic population," Palpatine replied dismissively. "Primarily concentrated among idealists, criminals, and those who profited from Republic corruption. The vast majority of beings accept Imperial rule because it works. Because their lives are genuinely better under order than they were under chaos. And the ones who don't accept it, the ones you imprison, execute, hunt down, are offered every opportunity to cease their destructive activities and rejoin productive society. Most refuse. Most choose ideology over pragmatism, principle over survival. I do not enjoy eliminating them, but I will not allow a vocal minority to destabilize a system that benefits billions." The Emperor's voice hardened slightly. "You of all people should understand this. How many villains did you kill on Earth, Prime? How many people called you a murderer for doing what was necessary?" Prime felt the words hit like physical blows. He had killed. Multiple times. People who'd threatened his world, who'd given him no choice, who'd proven they couldn't be redeemed or contained. And yes, other heroes had condemned him for it, called him no better than the villains he fought. I did what I had to do, Prime said, but his voice sounded hollow even to himself. As do I, Palpatine replied gently. The difference is that I don't pretend otherwise. I don't claim moral superiority or dress tyranny in the language of heroism. I am what this galaxy requires, a leader strong enough to make decisions others cannot. And you, my young friend, could be the same. A force for genuine good, unbound by the cowardice of democratic consensus. The Emperor rose, placing a paternal hand on Prime's shoulder, a gesture that should have been comforting but felt vaguely threatening. One more day remains in our agreement. Tomorrow, I will show you something that will clarify everything. A demonstration of what the Empire truly represents. And then you will make your choice, join us in bringing order to chaos, or return to the rebellion and watch them fail as the Jedi failed, as the Republic failed, as every weak-willed government in history has failed. After Prime left, escorted by royal guards to his palatial chambers, Palpatine returned to his throne and smiled into the darkness. The boy was nearly broken, his certainty shattered, his convictions crumbling. One more push, one carefully orchestrated demonstration, and Superboy-Prime would become the Empire's greatest weapon. And once committed, once he'd acted in the Empire's name, he would be trapped. Guilt and cognitive dissonance would chain him more securely than any prison. He would justify his choices, rationalize his compromises, become exactly what Palpatine needed, a godlike enforcer who believed himself a hero even as he served tyranny. The dark side had many tools for corruption. The Force was merely the most obvious. On Yavin 4, the rebel command center buzzed with desperate energy. Their deep cover agent had transmitted Prime's itinerary. Tomorrow, the Emperor would take him to an undisclosed location for a demonstration. Intelligence suggested it might be a weapons test, possibly involving the Death Star, or a staged incident designed to make the Empire appear heroic. We need to extract him, argued General Draven, the Alliance's intelligence chief. Before Palpatine completes whatever conditioning process he's begun. Extract him how? Leia countered. He's on Coruscant, surrounded by the entire Imperial military. And he's cooperating willingly. We can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. Then we expose the Emperor's manipulation, Mon Mothma suggested. Get information to Prime that contradicts Palpatine's narrative. He's been shown carefully curated truth for 5 days, Leia replied. One contradictory message won't break through that conditioning. We'd need something undeniable. Something Palpatine can't explain away. Then we're too late, Dodonna said quietly. If tomorrow's demonstration succeeds, we lose him. And if we lose him to the Empire, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Leia stared at the tactical displays, at the strategic maps showing Imperial dominance across the galaxy. The Alliance survived through hope, the belief that impossible odds could still be overcome, that goodness would ultimately triumph over evil. But hope had never faced anything like Superboy-Prime serving the Empire. Prepare a transmission, she ordered finally. Everything we have on Alderaan. On Palpatine's manipulation of the Clone Wars. On the Jedi Purge. On every atrocity the Empire has committed. If Prime is going to make this choice, he deserves to see the complete picture, not just the Emperor's edited version. Will it be enough? Mon Mothma asked. Leia thought of her father, of Anakin Skywalker who'd been seduced by promises of power and order, who'd become Darth Vader through a series of small compromises that seemed reasonable at the time. I don't know, she admitted. But we have to try. Because if we don't, the galaxy loses more than a potential ally. It loses any hope that power can exist without corruption. And that might be the most dangerous thing Palpatine could achieve. The Emperor's personal shuttle departed Coruscant at dawn, accompanied by an escort of TIE fighters that peeled away once they reached the edge of the system. Prime sat across from Palpatine in the luxurious cabin, watching hyperspace stream past the viewports in cascades of blue-white light. Vader stood nearby, silent and imposing, his respirator the only sound breaking the journey's quiet tension. Where are we going? Prime asked. To the Ghorman system, Palpatine replied. A recent acquisition. The planet attempted to secede from the Empire 6 months ago. Corporate interests convinced the local government that independence would be more profitable. They were wrong, of course. Without Imperial infrastructure, their economy collapsed within weeks. Pirate raids devastated their shipping. Disease outbreaks went unchecked. Starvation became widespread. And you're taking me to see Imperial relief efforts? Prime guessed, recognizing the pattern. Another carefully orchestrated lesson about the Empire's necessity. In a manner of speaking. The Emperor's smile was unreadable. I'm taking you to see the consequence of choices. The reality of what happens when systems reject order in favor of ideology. The shuttle dropped out of hyperspace above Ghorman, a terrestrial world wrapped in clouds, its surface dotted with cities that looked intact from orbit. But as they descended, Prime's enhanced vision picked up details the sensors couldn't: abandoned buildings, empty streets, infrastructure deteriorating from neglect. The capital city's spaceport was operational but eerily quiet, with only a handful of transports visible on the landing platforms. Imperial forces had established a perimeter around the government complex, stormtroopers in precise formations, AT-ST walkers patrolling the approaches, command centers coordinating relief operations. But something felt wrong. The military presence was too heavy, too aggressive for a humanitarian mission. Palpatine led Prime through the secured zone to a plaza where thousands of Ghorman citizens had been assembled. They looked malnourished, desperate, their clothes threadbare and dirty. Imperial medics moved among them, distributing rations and administering basic treatment, but the crowd's mood was volatile, angry murmurs rippling through the masses like electricity seeking ground. These are the people who demanded independence, Palpatine explained, his voice carrying easily despite speaking normally. Who believed corporate propaganda over Imperial stability. They made their choice. Now they live with the consequences. A platform had been erected in the plaza's center, where several Ghorman officials stood under guard, the former governor, corporate representatives, local militia leaders who'd supported secession. They looked terrified, and Prime's stomach twisted with sudden understanding of what was about to happen. No, he said quietly. This is an execution. This is justice, Palpatine corrected. These individuals convinced an entire planet to reject Imperial protection. Their decisions directly resulted in 12,000 deaths from starvation, disease, and pirate raids. Under Imperial law, negligent governance that causes mass casualties is a capital offense. They will answer for their crimes. They should get a trial. A fair process. They had a trial. Imperial judges reviewed the evidence, heard their defense, and rendered verdict. The sentence is death. Palpatine gestured toward the crowd. These people, the survivors of this planet's disastrous experiment with independence, have the right to witness justice being served. Vader stepped forward, his lightsaber igniting with that distinctive snap hiss. The crowd's murmur grew louder, a mixture of satisfaction and horror. The former governor began pleading, his voice breaking as he begged for mercy, explaining that he'd been misled, that he truly believed independence was best for his people. Prime moved without thinking, interposing himself between Vader and the condemned officials. Stop. This isn't justice. This is a show execution designed to terrorize people into compliance. It is both, Palpatine replied calmly. Justice can serve multiple purposes. These men are genuinely guilty. Their punishment is legally mandated. And yes, their deaths will remind others of the cost of rejecting Imperial order. All three facts can be simultaneously true. I won't let you murder them. Vader's lightsaber remained ignited, but he didn't advance. You would protect traitors. Men whose incompetence killed thousands. I'd protect people from execution without a real trial. From tyranny dressed up as law. Prime turned to face Palpatine directly. This is what you really are, isn't it? Not the benevolent leader bringing order. Not the pragmatist making hard choices. Just another dictator using fear to maintain power. The Emperor's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air, a tension that made even Vader tense slightly. You judge too quickly, young Prime. Tell me, on your Earth, did you never kill villains? Never execute threats without trial? Never act as judge and executioner when the situation demanded it? That was different. Those were active threats. Immediate dangers. These men are active threats, Palpatine interrupted, his voice hardening. Their ideology spreads even now. Their example encourages other systems to consider secession. Every day they remain alive, they inspire others to reject Imperial protection and doom more populations to the same fate that befell Ghorman. Their continued existence is an ongoing threat to galactic stability. Prime wanted to argue, but the logic was infuriatingly consistent with his own past justifications. He had killed villains. Had executed threats. Had decided that some people were too dangerous to be left alive. The only difference was that he'd been certain, absolutely certain, that he was right. Wasn't he? Make your choice, Palpatine said softly. Stand aside and allow justice to proceed. Or protect traitors and announce to this galaxy that you believe ideology matters more than consequences. That you'll defend those who cause mass death through incompetence, because their motives were pure. Prime looked at the condemned officials, men who might have genuinely believed they were doing right, who'd made catastrophic mistakes, who were about to die to prove a point. Then he looked at the crowd, thousands of people who'd suffered because of those mistakes, who'd watched their families starve, who wanted someone to blame for their agony. And for the first time in his life, Superboy-Prime genuinely didn't know what to do. The moment stretched, everyone frozen, waiting for his decision. Then a sound cut through the tension, a transmission alert from Vader's communicator. The Dark Lord stepped aside, listening to the encrypted message, his posture shifting in ways that suggested alarm. My Lord Emperor, Vader reported. Rebel operatives have infiltrated the capital. They're broadcasting anti-Imperial propaganda to the assembled crowd. As if on cue, holographic projectors, small devices that must have been planted hours earlier, activated throughout the plaza. Images filled the air, Alderaan exploding into debris, the Death Star firing its super laser at point-blank range. Palpatine's face during the Clone Wars, meeting secretly with Separatist leaders. Documents detailing the Jedi Purge, showing it wasn't a spontaneous uprising but a carefully orchestrated genocide. Testimony from survivors describing Imperial atrocities on dozens of worlds. And a single message, broadcast in a woman's voice Prime didn't recognize, Superboy-Prime. You've been shown what the Emperor wants you to see. This is what he's hidden. This is the truth. The crowd's mood shifted instantly, confusion, then anger, directed now not at the condemned officials but at the Imperial forces surrounding them. Stormtroopers moved to shut down the projectors, but the damage was done. Riots were seconds away from erupting. Palpatine's expression remained serene, almost amused. How predictable. The rebellion always thinks exposing truth will change hearts and minds. They never understand that people don't choose sides based on facts. They choose based on survival. He raised his hand, and lightning, actual electricity, purple-white and crackling, erupted from his fingertips, arcing across the plaza to strike the projectors. They exploded in showers of sparks, the holographic images dying instantly. The crowd screamed, panicking, stampeding away from the Emperor's display of power. Prime stared in shock. You're Force-sensitive. You're not just a politician. You're like them. He gestured at Vader, at the destroyed Inquisitors' weapons he'd seen in the archives. You're Sith. I am the Sith, Palpatine corrected, his voice resonating with power that made the air itself vibrate. The last master of an order that has shaped galactic history for millennia. Did you think I commanded Lord Vader through mere political authority? That I destroyed the Jedi through legislation? I am the dark side incarnate, boy. And you have spent 5 days learning from the most dangerous being this galaxy has ever produced. The Emperor's frail appearance melted away like an illusion. He stood straighter, his yellow eyes blazing with malevolent energy, his presence suddenly overwhelming despite his physical form remaining unchanged. You were never learning about the Empire's necessity. You were learning how easily absolute conviction can be eroded. How quickly heroes can be made to question themselves. How simple it is to make evil seem reasonable when presented with sufficient context. Prime felt fury building in his chest, the familiar rage that came from being manipulated, from being made a fool. You lied to me. Everything you showed me was designed to break me down, make me doubt myself. I showed you truth, Palpatine interrupted. Carefully selected, strategically framed truth. The Republic was corrupt. The Jedi did fail. Imperial infrastructure does save lives. Every fact I presented was accurate. I simply omitted certain, complementary facts. Such as the Death Star currently orbiting Alderaan, fully operational and awaiting my command. Such as the planet-wide genocide I personally orchestrated against the Jedi. Such as the hundreds of atrocities committed in the name of order. The Emperor's smile widened. But you already knew, didn't you? Deep down, you sensed the manipulation. You simply wanted to believe because it gave you permission to stop questioning your own methods. I offered you exactly what you came to this galaxy seeking, validation that power without apology is heroism. I'm going to stop you, Prime said, his heat vision beginning to glow red. I'm going to tear down everything you've built. No, Palpatine replied with absolute certainty. You're going to make a choice. In approximately 30 seconds, my forces will open fire on this crowd to suppress the riot. Thousands will die, men, women, children, all casualties of the rebellion's ill-conceived propaganda attack. You can prevent this. Easily. Your invulnerability makes you the perfect shield. Simply position yourself between my forces and the civilians, and they'll survive. You're forcing me to protect Imperial objectives. I'm forcing you to choose, Palpatine corrected. Protect these people and become complicit in Imperial control, or maintain your moral purity and watch them die. The rebellion forced this situation by infiltrating this event. I'm merely responding to their provocation. What happens next is entirely your decision. Vader's forces were already moving into position, heavy weapons tracking the panicking crowd. The condemned officials had fled in the chaos. The entire plaza had devolved into screaming pandemonium. And Superboy-Prime stood at the center, realizing with dawning horror that Palpatine had engineered a scenario where every choice was wrong. If he saved the civilians, he'd be helping the Empire maintain control, validating their show of force. If he let them die, he'd be complicit through inaction, proving he cared more about principles than lives. If he attacked the Imperial forces, he'd escalate the violence and probably cause even more casualties. There was no right answer. No heroic solution. Just an impossible choice between bad options, designed specifically to break him. 10 seconds, Palpatine announced pleasantly. What will you be, Superboy-Prime? Hero or ideologue? Pragmatist or purist? Choose now, or the choice will be made for you. Prime's hands clenched into fists, his entire body trembling with impotent rage and impossible decision, as the galaxy's most accomplished manipulator waited to see which version of evil his newest victim would embrace. Prime moved. Not toward the stormtroopers, not toward Palpatine, but up, straight up, breaking atmosphere in 3 seconds, accelerating to escape velocity and beyond. He couldn't make the choice. Wouldn't let himself be twisted into either compliance or monstrous inaction. So he chose the only option Palpatine hadn't accounted for, rejection of the entire scenario. Behind him, on Ghorman's surface, the Emperor's laughter echoed across the plaza. Let him run, Palpatine commanded, waving off Vader's instinctive move to pursue. He'll be back. They always come back. And when he does, he'll have made his choice, even if he doesn't realize it yet. The stormtroopers fired into the crowd. Hundreds died in the opening salvo, their screams audible even through Prime's supersonic departure. He heard them. Heard every single one. And the guilt hit him like a physical force, driving him faster, harder, away from a situation he couldn't fix and couldn't accept. He needed space. Distance. Time to think without Palpatine's poisoned logic filling his head. Prime flew beyond Ghorman's moon, beyond the system's outer planets, into the empty void between stars where nothing existed except the cold clarity of vacuum and his own spiraling thoughts. Had he just killed those people by refusing to choose? Was running away the same as pulling the trigger? The Emperor would say yes. Would use this to prove that moral purity was cowardice, that heroes who wouldn't compromise were just murderers with better PR. But what was the alternative? Become the Empire's shield? Protect tyranny to save lives? Start down a path of small compromises that would end with him as another one of Palpatine's enforcers, rationalizing atrocities as necessary? Prime floated in the darkness, his invulnerable body feeling more vulnerable than it ever had in combat. Because this wasn't a fight he could win with strength. This was exactly the kind of complex moral situation he'd always struggled with, the kind that had gotten him labeled a villain on Earth Prime. His superhearing picked up something unexpected, an energy signature, massive and unnatural, emanating from somewhere deeper in the galaxy. Not a star, the frequency was wrong, too focused, too deliberately controlled. Some kind of weapon, maybe. Something generating power on a scale that dwarfed anything he'd encountered in this galaxy. Prime followed the signal, partly out of curiosity, partly because it gave him a purpose that wasn't drowning in guilt. He flew for hours, crossing sectors at speeds that made hyperspace look pedestrian, until he found the source. A moon. Except it wasn't a moon. The Death Star hung in orbit above Alderaan like a malevolent artificial moon, its superlaser dish pointed directly at the peaceful blue-green world below. Prime's X-ray vision penetrated the station's outer hull, revealing a power core that made his arc reactor knowledge from Earth Prime seem primitive. This thing could destroy, what? A city? A continent? He scanned deeper, accessing the station's exterior comm channels with his superhearing, and caught fragments of transmissions. Testing cycle complete, full power confirmed. Princess Leia's interrogation yielded nothing. Lord Vader recommends demonstration. Target confirmed, Alderaan, coordinates locked. Prime's blood went cold. They were going to fire this thing. At an entire planet. He flew closer, approaching the superlaser focusing array, trying to understand the mechanism. The weapon was charging, he could see energy building in the reactor core, funneling through 8 separate tributary beams that would converge in the focusing dish. In minutes, maybe less, this station would fire. And in his mind, Palpatine's words echoed, such as the Death Star currently orbiting Alderaan, fully operational and awaiting my command. The Emperor had told him. Had practically invited him to figure it out. This was another test, another impossible scenario designed to break him. Save Alderaan and prove he'd rejected the Empire completely, become an enemy that would be hunted forever. Or do nothing and watch billions die while maintaining his precious moral ambiguity. Prime didn't hesitate this time. He flew directly into the superlaser's focusing chamber, positioning himself at the exact convergence point where the tributary beams would meet. His body would absorb the energy, dissipate it harmlessly. He'd done similar things before, absorbed nuclear blasts, tanked attacks that cracked continental plates. This would hurt, probably, but he'd survive. The Death Star fired. 8 beams of concentrated destruction converged on Prime's position with the force of a small star going supernova. The energy was beyond anything he'd calculated, not just powerful but fundamentally wrong, tapping into forces that shouldn't exist, energies that felt diseased somehow, corrupted at their source. Dark side energy, he realized too late, the same wrongness he'd sensed from Palpatine, weaponized and amplified to planetary-scale destruction. The beams hit him simultaneously, and for the first time since arriving in this galaxy, Superboy-Prime felt pain. Not damage, his invulnerability held, his Kryptonian physiology absorbing the impossible energies, but pain nonetheless. The dark side corruption tried to find purchase in his soul, to twist and corrode from within, to do spiritually what it couldn't accomplish physically. Prime screamed, a sound that carried through the vacuum via sheer vibrational force, and redirected the Death Star's beam away from Alderaan. The super laser, designed to punch through a planet's crust and detonate its core, instead carved a burning line across empty space, missing Alderaan by thousands of kilometers. The planet's population would never know how close they'd come to annihilation. Would never know that an alien being from another universe had just saved their entire civilization. Inside the Death Star's command center, Grand Moff Tarkin stared at the firing trajectory with dawning horror. Impossible. The targeting computer confirmed lock. There's nothing that could deflect that beam. Not nothing, Vader said quietly, his force senses screaming alarm. The anomaly. He's here. He intercepted the beam directly. No organic being could survive that much concentrated energy, Tarkin insisted. He's not organic, Vader replied. Not in any way that matters. Inform the Emperor immediately. Superboy-Prime has made his choice. Prime hung in space, his costume scorched, his body radiating absorbed energy that would take hours to fully dissipate. The pain was fading, the dark side corruption expelled by his fundamental incompatibility with the Force, but the implications were clear. He'd just declared war on the Empire. Publicly. Definitively. There would be no more negotiations. No more philosophical discussions. Palpatine would hunt him with every resource available. Vader would pursue him without mercy. The Death Star would be retargeted at him, at anyone who helped him, at anything that gave him purpose. And Prime realized, floating in the void above Alderaan, that this was exactly what Palpatine had wanted all along. Not to recruit him. To radicalize him. To transform him from an uncertain element into a definitive threat that would justify the Empire's most extreme measures. Every system that aided him would be punished. Every world that sheltered him would be made an example. The Emperor would use Prime's heroism as a weapon against the very people he was trying to save. You magnificent bastard, Prime whispered, understanding finally dawning. You were never trying to turn me. You were trying to make me your villain. A transmission crackled through the local comm channels, Palpatine's voice, broadcast across the entire sector. The anomaly known as Superboy-Prime has committed an act of war against the Galactic Empire. He has attacked the Death Star battle station, attempted to sabotage Imperial security operations, and demonstrated himself to be an enemy of galactic peace. All systems are hereby ordered to deny him sanctuary. Any world that harbors this terrorist will be considered in rebellion and dealt with accordingly. The Empire protects its citizens. And we will protect you from this threat, no matter the cost. Prime stared at Alderaan, a planet that would now live under the shadow of that speech, a population that had just been designated potential casualties if they so much as acknowledged his existence. Palpatine had won. Not the war hadn't even begun, but this battle. He'd transformed Prime from a potential asset into a perfect enemy, powerful enough to be a genuine threat, isolated enough to be vulnerable, heroic enough to create collateral damage everywhere he went. And the worst part? Prime had played directly into it. Had made every choice Palpatine predicted, had reacted exactly as the Emperor anticipated. He needed allies. Real ones. People who understood this galaxy's complexity better than he did. The Rebel Alliance was the obvious choice, but after abandoning those civilians on Ghorman, would they even accept him? Prime set course for the Yavin system, where intelligence suggested the rebellion maintained a hidden base. He flew slowly this time, conserving energy, giving himself time to think about what he'd say, how he'd explain the catastrophic mistakes of the past week. Behind him, aboard the Death Star, Grand Moff Tarkin turned to Darth Vader with barely concealed frustration. We could have destroyed Alderaan. Demonstrated the station's full capability. Instead, we're hunting one anomalous humanoid. The Emperor's vision is absolute, Vader replied. Superboy-Prime is more valuable as an enemy than Alderaan was as a target. His existence will justify measures even the Senate would hesitate to approve. Every attack he makes will strengthen Imperial authority. Every life he saves will endanger thousands more. A long game, Tarkin observed. The only game the Emperor plays, Vader confirmed. And he has never lost. The rebel base on Yavin 4 detected Prime's approach 3 hours before he arrived, a single humanoid figure flying through space at impossible speeds, broadcasting no IFF signature, matching the energy profile of the entity that had just attacked the Death Star. Alarms blared across the command center. X-Wings scrambled to intercept. Ground-based ion cannons charged and tracked his trajectory. Princess Leia stood in the war room, watching the tactical display with her heart pounding. This was it, the moment that would determine whether Superboy-Prime became the rebellion's greatest asset or their most catastrophic mistake. All fighters, hold position, she commanded through the comm, do not engage. Repeat, do not engage unless he demonstrates hostile intent. Your Highness, General Dodonna protested, after what happened on Ghorman. Was the Emperor's manipulation, Leia interrupted firmly. Which our intelligence operation accidentally enabled. If Prime had wanted to attack us, he wouldn't fly directly to our base and wait to be intercepted. He'd simply destroy it. Instead, he's approaching slowly, deliberately, like someone asking permission to land. Mon Mothma entered the room, her expression troubled. Reports from Ghorman confirm Imperial forces massacred civilians after Prime's departure. The Empire is blaming him for the deaths, claiming he provoked the riot and abandoned the population to face consequences. Of course they are, Leia replied bitterly. That was always Palpatine's plan. Force Prime into an impossible situation, then use the outcome to isolate him further. The question is whether Prime understands what happened, or if he still believes there was a right answer he simply failed to find. Prime descended through Yavin 4's atmosphere, landing gently in the jungle, clearing the rebels designated as a safe approach zone. A dozen soldiers immediately surrounded him, their weapons raised but not firing, their body language broadcasting nervous terror barely held in check. He raised his hands slowly, a gesture of peace that looked absurd given that their blasters couldn't scratch him anyway. I need to speak with Princess Leia. Or Mon Mothma. Or whoever leads the rebellion. I was wrong. About everything. And I need help. The admission cost him something. Prime could feel his pride crumbling, the absolute certainty that had sustained him for years finally breaking under the weight of catastrophic failure. He'd been so sure he understood heroism, understood right and wrong. Palpatine had proven otherwise with surgical precision. Leia emerged from the temple entrance, flanked by royal guards but walking ahead of them with the confident authority of someone who'd grown up negotiating with politicians and warlords. She was younger than Prime expected, maybe early 20s, but her eyes held a weariness that spoke of years living under Imperial tyranny. Superboy-Prime, she said, her voice carefully neutral. You attacked the Death Star. Saved Alderaan. And now you're here, asking for our help. That's quite a dramatic shift from following Lord Vader into the Imperial Palace a week ago. I made mistakes, Prime admitted, the words tasting like ash. I thought I could figure this galaxy out on my own. Thought I knew what heroism looked like. The Emperor showed me exactly how naive I was. Palpatine is exceptionally skilled at that, Leia replied, gesturing for the guards to lower their weapons. He's had 60 years to perfect the art of turning people's convictions against them. The fact that you recognized the manipulation and escaped it puts you ahead of many who faced him. My father included. Prime blinked. Your father? Darth Vader, Leia said quietly, the pain evident despite her controlled tone. Before he became the Emperor's enforcer, he was Anakin Skywalker, Jedi Knight, hero of the Clone Wars, and my biological father. Palpatine corrupted him through exactly the same methods he used on you. Showed him carefully selected truths, exploited his fears, offered power disguised as necessity. By the time Anakin realized what he'd become, it was too late to turn back. The revelation hit Prime like a physical blow. Vader had been a Jedi. Had been a hero. And Palpatine had twisted him into a monster so thoroughly that even his own daughter couldn't save him. "I left people to die on Ghorman," Prime said, his voice breaking. "I ran because I couldn't make the choice Palpatine forced on me. And hundreds died because I wasn't strong enough." "No," Leia interrupted sharply. "Hundreds died because the Emperor ordered his forces to fire on civilians. You didn't pull those triggers. You didn't engineer that scenario. Palpatine did. And he did it specifically to make you feel responsible for his atrocities. That guilt you're feeling. That's exactly what he wants. It's a weapon he'll use to control your decisions going forward." Mon Mothma joined them, her expression sympathetic but analytical. "The Empire is broadcasting your attack on the Death Star as terrorism. Claiming you're a threat to galactic stability. Every system is being warned that harboring you will result in immediate Imperial retaliation. By saving Alderaan, you've painted an enormous target on yourself and anyone who helps you." "I know," Prime replied. "Which is why I'm here. You understand this galaxy in ways I don't. You know how to fight the Empire without playing into Palpatine's hands. I need to learn. Really learn, not just memorize propaganda designed to break me down." Leia exchanged glances with Mon Mothma, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, Leia spoke, "The Rebel Alliance operates on principles that might frustrate you. We don't have unlimited resources or godlike powers. We can't simply destroy every Imperial installation we encounter. We choose our battles carefully, prioritize targets strategically, and accept that sometimes the best action is no action at all. Can you work within those limitations?" Prime thought about the past week, about charging headfirst into situations he didn't understand, about destroying facilities without knowing their full purpose, about the cascade of unintended consequences his recklessness had caused. "Yes," he said firmly. "I can learn to think before I act. To consider consequences. To be part of a team instead of a solo operator who assumes he knows best." "You saved Alderaan," Mon Mothma observed. "Intercepted the Death Star's superlaser directly. That required both incredible power and incredible courage. But it also revealed your capabilities to the Empire. They now know you can absorb planet-destroying energies. They'll adjust their tactics accordingly." "Let them," Prime replied, some of his old confidence returning. "I'm tired of being manipulated. Tired of being used as a weapon against the people I'm trying to protect. If the Empire wants a war, they'll get one. But this time, I fight on my terms, with people who actually understand what they're fighting for." A Bothan intelligence officer approached, carrying a datapad with urgent updates. "Your Highness, we're receiving reports from across the Outer Rim. The Emperor has issued a formal declaration, any system that aids Superboy-Prime will face Death Star retaliation. He's not bluffing, the battle station is being repositioned to demonstrate Imperial resolve. Target unknown, but likely a populated world with suspected rebel sympathies." Leia's face went pale. "He's going to destroy an entire planet to prove Prime can't save everyone. Then we stop him," Prime said immediately. "I go to the Death Star, I destroy it." "No," Mon Mothma interrupted. "That's exactly what Palpatine wants. You attack the Death Star, you get bogged down fighting Star Destroyers and TIE squadrons, and while you're occupied, the Emperor consolidates power elsewhere. Or worse, the Death Star fires while you're fighting its escorts, and you're forced to watch billions die because you were out of position. Then what do I do?" Prime demanded, frustration bleeding into his voice. "Just wait while the Empire threatens planets. Accept that I can't save everyone." "You learn to fight smart," Leia replied. "The Alliance has been planning an assault on the Death Star for months. We have partial schematics from stolen Imperial data. There's a vulnerability, a thermal exhaust port that leads directly to the main reactor. One precise shot could trigger a chain reaction that destroys the entire station. Then I'll make that shot. Just point me at the target. The trench run requires navigating through defensive turbolaser fire while TIE fighters pursue you, Dodonna explained, pulling up tactical displays. It requires precision piloting, split-second timing, and the ability to hit a 2-meter target at the end of a narrow trench while under fire. Your invulnerability is irrelevant if you can't make the shot. Prime stared at the schematics, his enhanced mind processing the tactical challenge instantly. I can't pilot your ships. Don't know the controls. But I could fly the trench myself, use heat vision to hit the exhaust port. And every weapon on the station would target you, Leia countered. They know you can absorb energy now. They'll adjust tactics, maybe use gravity wells, tractor beams, or simply fire the super laser at whatever planet you're trying to protect while you're pinned down fighting defenders. The strategic complexity was dizzying. Every solution created new problems. Every strength became a vulnerability Palpatine could exploit. Then tell me how to help, Prime said finally, the last of his arrogance crumbling. I'm done pretending I can save the galaxy alone. You're the experts. I'll follow your lead. Mon Mothma studied him carefully, weighing risks against desperate need. Finally, she nodded. The Death Star operation proceeds as planned. Our pilots will make the trench run. But the Empire will deploy everything to stop them, TIE fighters, Star Destroyers, possibly Vader himself in his personal fighter. You'll be fighting hundreds of TIE fighters simultaneously, drawing fire, protecting ships that might still be destroyed despite your best efforts. And if the Death Star fires before our pilots succeed, you'll have to make the same impossible choice you faced on Ghorman, try to block the beam and potentially fail, or watch a planet die. There are no guarantees in war. No perfect solutions. Prime met her eyes, seeing in them the same burden he'd carried since Earth Prime. The weight of power combined with the knowledge that power alone was never enough. I understand, he said. But I'd rather fail trying to save people than succeed at destroying them. Even if Palpatine uses my failures against me. Even if the Empire calls me a terrorist. I came to this galaxy to be a hero. Time to figure out what that actually means. Leia smiled slightly, the first genuine warmth she'd shown since he arrived. Welcome to the rebellion, Superboy-Prime. Try to keep up. The Death Star hung in orbit above Scarif like a silent promise of annihilation. Intelligence confirmed the Emperor's target, a tropical world with suspected rebel sympathies, home to 3 billion beings who had committed no crime beyond questioning Imperial authority. The demonstration would be visible across a dozen sectors, a message written in planetary destruction that would echo for generations. Unless the rebellion stopped it in the next 4 hours. The assault fleet assembled at the rendezvous point beyond Scarif sensor range, 30 fighters against a battle station the size of a small moon, supported by 6 Star Destroyers and over 700 TIE fighters. The odds were mathematically impossible. But the rebellion had always specialized in impossible victories. Prime floated in vacuum beside the lead X-Wing squadron, his body generating a faint atmospheric envelope through sheer electromagnetic manipulation. He'd spent the past 2 days training with rebel pilots, learning their tactics, understanding how fragile their ships were compared to his invulnerability. Each X-Wing represented a person, a pilot with family, history, dreams, people who would mourn them if they died. Not just statistics. Not collateral damage in some abstract war. Real people making the choice to fly into almost certain death because someone had to try. It humbled him in ways Palpatine's manipulation never could. All wings report in, came the voice of Red Leader, the veteran pilot commanding the assault. Prime had learned his name was Garvin Dryce, a survivor of the Clone Wars who'd been fighting tyranny longer than Prime had been alive. Red 2 standing by. Red 3 standing by. Red 5 standing by. Prime activated his personal communicator, a device the rebels had modified to interface with standard Alliance frequencies. Prime standing by. Ready to clear your path. Copy that, Prime, Red Leader acknowledged. Remember, your job is to keep the TIE fighters and capital ships off us during the trench run. We can't maneuver effectively while under fire. You're our shield. Understood. I won't let you down. See that you don't, came a new voice, gruff, confident, carrying the unmistakable accent of a Corellian smuggler. Because if this goes sideways, I'm blaming you, kid. Who's that? Prime asked. Han Solo, Leia's voice cut in from the command ship. Smuggler we hired for transport. He decided to join the assault at the last minute. Decided my payment wasn't worth much if the Empire blows up the galaxy, Han corrected. Don't get used to it. Soon as this is over, I'm collecting my credits and disappearing. Of course you are, Leia replied, her tone suggesting she didn't believe him for a second. The fleet jumped to hyperspace in synchronized precision, emerging directly in front of the Death Star. Immediately, alarms shrieked across every Imperial frequency. Turbolaser batteries rotated toward the rebel formation. TIE fighter launch bays erupted with streams of Imperial fighters. And from the command bridge, Grand Moff Tarkin's voice boomed across all channels. The rebel fleet has entered the system. All units engage. Lord Vader, deploy to intercept. Prime didn't wait for orders. He accelerated toward the emerging TIE swarm at speeds that made their targeting computers scream errors. His first strike disintegrated 12 fighters simultaneously, his heat vision carving through their solar panel wings with surgical precision. He was careful, always careful, to aim for engines and cockpits, to give pilots microseconds to eject if they could. Even Imperial pilots were just people following orders, and he'd learned the difference between necessary violence and gratuitous slaughter. The TIE fighters adapted quickly, spreading formation, using coordinated fire patterns to track his movements. They couldn't hurt him, but they could slow him down, force him to waste time dodging and repositioning. Behind their screen, heavier TIE bombers maneuvered toward the rebel capital ships, their payload bays loaded with proton bombs capable of cracking cruiser hulls. Prime, we've got bombers coming through your perimeter. Red Leader warned. Prime spun mid-flight, his freeze breath creating a wall of crystallized atmosphere that the bombers flew directly into. Their viewports frosted over instantly, blinding their pilots, sending them spinning out of control. Prime caught the ejecting pilots one by one, depositing them on the Death Star's outer hull where they could wait for retrieval, alive but out of the fight. Bomber threat neutralized, he reported. Proceed to attack vector. The X-Wings dove toward the Death Star's equatorial trench, their S-foils locked in attack position. Prime followed from above, intercepting TIE fighters that tried to pursue, using his body as a physical barrier to block turbolaser fire from the station's surface batteries. Energy washed over him in cascading waves, not enough to hurt, but enough to push him back, to test the limits of his invulnerability. Then Vader entered the battle. The Dark Lord flew a modified TIE Advanced, its distinctive angular profile cutting through the chaos with predatory grace. Unlike the standard TIE pilots who attacked in swarms, Vader moved with surgical precision, his force precognition allowing him to anticipate targets before they maneuvered. Red 2 exploded in a fireball. Red 3 took a direct hit to his engines and spun out of formation, pilot ejecting at the last second. We've got a problem, Red Leader transmitted, his voice tight with controlled fear. Vader's targeting our squad leaders. He's cutting through us. Prime intercepted Vader's next attack vector, positioning himself directly in the TIE Advanced's firing line. Vader's shots impacted Prime's chest and ricocheted harmlessly into space. Through the TIE's viewport, Prime saw the Dark Lord's mask tilting slightly, the closest thing to surprise Vader would ever display. You cannot protect them all, anomaly, Vader's voice crackled through the comm, distorted by interference. I need only kill one pilot to abort their attack run. And I am very patient. Vader's TIE rolled, coming around for another pass, but Prime matched him move for move. They danced through three-dimensional space at speeds that would have killed normal pilots from G-forces alone, Vader's force-enhanced reflexes against Prime's superhuman reaction time. The Sith Lord was brilliant, using debris as cover, positioning Prime between himself and the Death Star's own defensive fire, forcing Prime to constantly adjust position to protect the X-Wings below. "Trench run commencing," Red Leader announced. "We're going in." The remaining X-Wings descended into the Death Star's surface trench, their sensors locked on the thermal exhaust port still thousands of meters ahead. Surface turrets tracked their progress, firing in coordinated patterns that filled the trench with lethal crossfire. Red 4 took a direct hit and exploded. Red 6's shields failed, his X-Wing crippled and drifting. Prime wanted to help them, to shield every fighter individually, but Vader kept him engaged, always just out of reach, always threatening another kill if Prime broke away. The Dark Lord was using the Force to enhance his piloting beyond anything technology alone could achieve, his precognition showing him Prime's intentions a split second before they manifested. "Almost there," Red Leader transmitted. His X-Wing shuddered as turbolaser fire grazed his shields. "Targeting computer online. I'm locked on." Vader's tie broke from engaging Prime and dove straight down into the trench behind Red Leader. Prime followed a microsecond later, but even that delay was enough. Vader fired, his shots precise and devastating. Red Leader's X-Wing exploded in the narrow confines of the trench, debris showering the ships behind him. "Red Leader is down," someone screamed. "Gold Leader, you're up, make your run." The Y-Wing squadron dove in, their heavier bombers less maneuverable but better armored. Vader pursued them methodically, his tie weaving through defensive fire that would have destroyed any other fighter. Gold 2 exploded. Gold 3's ion cannon malfunctioned. Gold Leader pushed through, his targeting computer achieving lock, his finger on the trigger. Prime had a split-second decision. He could intercept Vader, save Gold Leader, ensure the shot was made. But Vader's positioning was deliberate, calculated. If Prime moved to block, he'd leave the remaining X-Wings exposed to the TIE swarm still circling above the trench. And if Gold Leader missed, if the shot wasn't perfect, they'd have no second chance. "Trust them," Leia's voice echoed in his memory. "Trust that people can accomplish extraordinary things even without godlike power." Prime pulled back, focusing on the TIE fighters instead, creating a defensive perimeter that protected the trench entrance. It meant abandoning Gold Leader to face Vader alone. It meant trusting that one fragile pilot in a ship held together by spare parts and desperation could accomplish what Prime's invulnerability couldn't. Vader fired. Gold Leader's Y-Wing disintegrated. "That's it," someone said, voice breaking. "We're out of bombers. The Death Star is charging its super laser. We failed." "Not yet," came a new voice, young, determined, carrying conviction that shouldn't exist given the impossible odds. "Red 5 here. I'm going in." Luke Skywalker's X-Wing dove into the trench at full speed, his R2 unit beeping frantically about the overwhelming defensive fire. Prime didn't know this pilot personally, he was just another rebel, another person choosing to fight despite certain death, but something about his voice carried absolute certainty, as if the Force itself was guiding his actions. Vader sensed it too. The Dark Lord's tie pivoted with renewed intensity, pursuing this new target with focus that suggested recognition. "The Force is strong with this one," Vader muttered, audible through the open comm channel. Prime moved to intercept, but Vader had learned from their previous engagement. He positioned two wingmen between himself and Prime, forcing Prime to disable them first. Precious seconds where Vader closed distance on Luke's X-Wing, his targeting computer achieving lock, his finger tightening on the trigger. Then Han Solo's Millennium Falcon dropped out of nowhere, firing at Vader's wingmen and sending the Dark Lord spinning out of control. "You're all clear, kid," Han shouted triumphantly. "Now let's blow this thing and go home." Luke's X-Wing screamed down the trench, turbolaser fire missing by centimeters, his targeting computer providing firing solution. At the last possible second, Prime heard Luke's voice, "I'm switching off my targeting computer. The Force will guide me." The proton torpedoes launched, spiraling down the exhaust port with impossible precision, dropping perfectly into the 2-meter opening and disappearing into the Death Star's depths. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the station's entire equatorial trench erupted in sequential explosions, chain reactions racing through power conduits and reactor chambers, building toward inevitable catastrophic failure. "Pull up!" Red Leader's replacement screamed. "The whole thing's going to blow." The rebel fighters broke from the trench and accelerated toward space, Prime covering their retreat by positioning himself between them and the dying Death Star. Behind them, the station's surface buckled, atmosphere venting through 1,000-meter cracks, secondary explosions rippling across its hull like spreading disease. And then it detonated. The explosion was visible from 3 systems away, a miniature supernova that briefly outshone Scarif's sun, sending debris radiating outward at relativistic speeds. Prime weathered the shockwave easily, his body absorbing energies that would have vaporized planets, but he felt it nonetheless, the death of millions of Imperial personnel, technicians and gunners and officers who'd been following orders, who'd believed they were serving galactic stability. Not all of them had been evil. Most had simply been people doing their jobs. Prime floated in the aftermath, watching debris scatter into the void, and felt the weight of what the rebellion had accomplished. Not a clean victory. Not a heroic triumph without cost. The celebration on Yavin 4 was subdued despite the magnitude of their victory. The Death Star's destruction had saved billions, crippled the Empire's most feared weapon, and proven that the rebellion could strike at the heart of Imperial power. But the cost had been devastating, nearly 60% casualties among the assault wings, entire squadrons reduced to memories and empty chairs in the pilot-ready room. Prime stood apart from the main ceremony, watching Luke Skywalker receive a medal from Princess Leia while the surviving pilots cheered. The young man had accomplished what Prime's godlike power couldn't, made a shot that required faith more than strength, trusted in something invisible rather than relying on invulnerability. It was humbling in ways Prime was still processing. "You did well," came a voice beside him. Mon Mothma had approached quietly, her diplomatic grace allowing her to move without drawing attention. "The pilots are alive because you kept the TIE fighters off them. That matters more than you realize." "I let Gold Leader die," Prime replied, his voice hollow. "And Red Leader. And dozens of others. I could have saved them if I'd been faster, smarter, better positioned. You could have tried to save them all individually and watched the Death Star destroy Scarif while you were occupied," Mon Mothma interrupted gently. "War requires impossible choices. You're learning to make them. That's more than most people with your power ever achieve." Prime thought about Palpatine, about the week of carefully constructed manipulation designed to break him. The Emperor had been right about one thing: power created responsibility that couldn't be escaped. But Palpatine had lied about the solution. Control and tyranny weren't the answer. Neither was reckless heroism that ignored consequences. The answer was this: imperfect people making flawed decisions, trying their best despite knowing they'd fail more often than they'd succeed, and accepting that failure didn't make them villains as long as they kept trying. "The Emperor will retaliate," Prime said. "He'll come after the Alliance with everything he has. And he'll use me as justification, claim the Death Star's destruction proves the rebellion has access to superweapons, that extreme measures are necessary to maintain order." Undoubtedly, Mon Mothma agreed. Palpatine is exceptionally skilled at turning defeats into political victories. But he's also lost his most powerful asset. The Death Star was meant to rule through fear. Without it, the Empire must rely on conventional forces. That gives us opportunities we didn't have before. "And what about me?" Prime asked. "Where do I fit in this war now? I'm not a pilot. I can't make precision shots like Luke. My strength is just strength. How do I help without causing more problems than I solve?" Leia joined them, her ceremonial robes replaced with practical military fatigues, her expression thoughtful. "You're learning. That's what matters. The galaxy doesn't need another all-powerful being imposing their vision of order. It needs people, exceptional people, certainly, but still people, working together towards something better than tyranny. A commotion at the temple entrance drew their attention. Rebel intelligence officers rushed toward the command center, their expressions urgent. Prime's superhearing picked up fragments, Imperial transmission. Emperor's speech, retaliation imminent. The celebration died as monitors throughout the base activated, displaying Palpatine's face, that ancient, lined visage somehow commanding absolute attention despite its apparent frailty. His yellow eyes gleamed with malevolent satisfaction as he addressed the entire galaxy. Citizens of the Empire. Today, terrorists destroyed the Death Star battle station, killing over 1 million loyal Imperial personnel. This act of unprecedented violence was perpetrated by the so-called Rebel Alliance, aided by the anomaly known as Superboy-Prime, a being from beyond our galaxy who has chosen to make war upon civilization itself. The Emperor's voice carried no anger, only patient disappointment, like a father explaining consequences to a wayward child. The Death Star represented hope, hope that order could be maintained without endless bloodshed, that the mere threat of overwhelming force could prevent rebellion before it began. The rebellion has destroyed that hope. They have proven that only through active enforcement, through constant vigilance, through measures that may seem extreme to the naive, can galactic stability be preserved. Prime felt ice forming in his stomach. This was Palpatine's counterattack, not military, but political and psychological. Therefore, I am implementing new security protocols across all Imperial systems. Martial law in sectors with suspected rebel sympathies. Enhanced interrogation procedures for suspected insurgents. And most importantly, the construction of a second Death Star will commence immediately, larger, more powerful, and immune to the design flaw the terrorists exploited. The transmission shifted to display construction plans, to show massive frameworks already being assembled in orbit above the forest moon of Endor. The Emperor had planned this contingency before the first Death Star even fired its weapon. He'd known it might be destroyed. Had counted on it, perhaps, as justification for even more extreme measures. The rebellion believes they've won a victory, Palpatine continued, his smile widening. They've merely guaranteed that the Empire's response will be absolute. There will be no negotiation. No mercy. No sanctuary. Every world that harbors these terrorists will be held accountable. Every system that questions Imperial authority will face consequences. And the anomaly, Superboy-Prime, will learn that power without wisdom leads only to destruction. The transmission ended, leaving shocked silence across the rebel base. He turned our greatest victory into his justification for total war, Dodonna said quietly. Every system that was considering joining us will now think twice. Every neutral world will side with the Empire out of fear. We destroyed the Death Star and somehow made Palpatine stronger. No, Prime said firmly, surprising himself with his conviction. We saved Scarif. We saved billions of lives. Yes, Palpatine will use this. Yes, things will get harder. But we proved the Empire isn't invincible. We showed the galaxy that resistance is possible. That matters more than the Emperor's propaganda. Leia studied him with newfound respect. You've changed. The person who arrived here would have immediately flown to Coruscant to fight Palpatine directly. The person who arrived here didn't understand this galaxy, Prime replied. I'm starting to. This isn't a fight we'll win through raw power or single decisive battles. It's a war of attrition, strategy, sacrifice, and hope. The Emperor is powerful, but he's not invincible. Vader is skilled, but he can be outmaneuvered. The Empire is vast, but it's also brittle, held together by fear rather than genuine loyalty. He turned to face the assembled rebel leadership, feeling the weight of their attention, understanding finally what responsibility actually meant. I can't save this galaxy alone. But I can help you save it. I'll be your shield when you need protection, your hammer when you need overwhelming force, and your student when I need to learn what real heroism looks like. Palpatine wanted to make me his weapon or his villain. I choose neither. I choose to be what the rebellion needs, an ally who understands that power without wisdom is tyranny, but wisdom without power is helplessness. And when Vader comes for you? Mon Mothma asked. When Palpatine deploys the new Death Star. When the Empire focuses all its resources on destroying the one being they can't control. Prime smiled, not the arrogant smirk he'd worn when first arriving, but something warmer, more genuine, tempered by failure and hard-won growth. Then I'll do what you've been doing for years. I'll fight. I'll fail. I'll get back up. I'll make impossible choices and live with the consequences. I'll trust my allies even when trusting them terrifies me. And I'll keep trying to be the hero this galaxy deserves rather than the one I thought I was. He looked up at Yavin's massive gas giant rising over the temple ruins, at the stars beyond where millions of worlds waited for liberation from tyranny. Palpatine thinks he's won because he's turned my arrival into justification for greater oppression. But he's made a critical mistake. He's given the rebellion exactly what it needs most, not a weapon or a solution, but proof that even godlike power can learn humility. That even beings who seem invincible can choose to serve rather than dominate. That heroism isn't about strength or righteousness, but about choosing to fight for something larger than yourself, even when victory seems impossible. Luke Skywalker approached, his young face serious but hopeful. The Force brought you here for a reason. I don't fully understand it yet, but I believe it. The galaxy needed someone to prove that power and wisdom aren't contradictory. That beings from beyond can choose to help rather than conquer. The Force didn't bring me, Prime corrected gently. My own desperation and failure did. But maybe that's the same thing. Maybe the galaxy doesn't need perfect heroes. Just people, and beings like me, who keep trying despite knowing we'll fail more often than we succeed. Outside the temple, rebel technicians were already preparing for evacuation. Imperial forces would locate Yavin 4 eventually. The Alliance would need to relocate, scatter, continue the endless dance of guerrilla warfare against impossible odds. But tonight, for just a few hours, they'd celebrate their impossible victory and mourn their staggering losses. And Superboy-Prime stood among them, no longer an anomaly, no longer a void in the Force, but something more valuable, an ally who'd learned that true strength meant knowing when not to use it. The war would continue. Palpatine would deploy new weapons. Vader would hunt them across the galaxy. Millions would die before tyranny finally fell. But tonight, the Death Star was destroyed. Tonight, the Empire was vulnerable. Tonight, hope survived. And sometimes, in a galaxy far, far away, hope was the most powerful weapon of all. The months that followed the Death Star's destruction transformed Superboy-Prime from an uncontrolled force of nature into something the Empire learned to fear for different reasons, a symbol of impossible resistance, proof that even godlike power could choose humility over domination. He wasn't the rebellion's solution, he remained their guardian, their shield, the being who made space for others to accomplish extraordinary things. When Imperial forces besieged rebel outposts, Prime held the line long enough for evacuations. When Star Destroyers hunted Alliance ships, he disabled their engines without killing crews. When Vader himself pursued rebel operatives, Prime engaged the Dark Lord in battles that scorched entire moons but always ended in stalemate rather than slaughter. Palpatine had been right about one thing, Prime's arrival changed the galaxy. But not in the way the Emperor predicted. Instead of becoming a weapon or a villain, Prime became something more dangerous to tyranny, an example that power without cruelty was possible, that beings of tremendous strength could choose restraint, that even someone from beyond the stars could learn to fight for something larger than themselves. The new Death Star rose above Endor, larger and more terrible than its predecessor. The Empire tightened its grip on 1,000 systems. Vader's pursuit never ceased. But the rebellion endured, strengthened by the knowledge that impossible victories were achievable, that hope could survive even the darkest times. And on a quiet night, as Prime floated in orbit above a liberated world, watching its inhabitants celebrate freedom they'd fought desperately to achieve, he finally understood what Leia had tried to teach him from the beginning. heroism wasn't about imposing your will on the galaxy. It was about standing beside people as they forged their own destiny, offering strength when needed but never demanding gratitude or obedience in return. The Force might not touch him. The galaxy might never fully understand him. But Superboy-Prime had found something more valuable than power or righteousness. Purpose tempered by wisdom, conviction balanced by humility, and the knowledge that being a hero meant accepting you'd fail as often as you succeeded while trying anyway. Palpatine called him a terrorist. The Empire declared him their greatest enemy. And across a million worlds, beings whispered his name as proof that even the darkest tyranny could be resisted. They were all right. And that was exactly what the galaxy needed. May the Force be with you. More stories await.